He was the Shadow King of the city, a man whose name was whispered in prayer or in terror. He didn't believe in ghosts, yet he had spent the last 2,000 nights haunted by a woman he had no right to remember. "Sir, the shipment from the quay has been intercepted!" a voice crackled from the doorway. Jin-woo didn't turn. His eyes were fixed on a small, battered silver locket in his palm. "I don't care about the cargo, Minho. I care about the person who leaked the coordinates. We found her, sir. She's in the holding room, but she's not who we expected." Jin-woo's grip tightened on the locket. He moved with the predatory grace of a man who had never known a fair fight. The elevator ride down to the basement was silent, save for the thrum of his own heartbeat. He expected a spy. He expected a grizzled informant. What he found was Anabella. She was strapped to a wooden chair, her mahogany skin glowing under the harsh, flickering fluorescent bulb. Her curves were accentuated by a torn silk dress, and despite the bruises on her wrists, her head was held high. She was a vision of defiant beauty in a room that smelled of oil and old blood. When the heavy iron door creaked open, her dark, almond-shaped eyes snapped to his. The air left Jin-woo's lungs. It was her. 6 years had passed since that chaotic night in Marseille, the night he had been a man on the run, and she had been the stranger who saved his life. The woman who had shared his bed in a fever dream of passion before he vanished into the dawn. "You," he breathed, the word barely a whisper. Anabella's lip curled. "If you're the one in charge of these thugs, tell them their knots are amateur, and then tell me where my son is." Jin-woo froze. "Son." The word struck him harder than any bullet ever had. He stepped into the light, his expensive Italian leather shoes clicking against the concrete. As he approached, the scent of her, vanilla and rain, hit him like a physical blow. He reached out, his long fingers trembling slightly as he went to touch her jaw. She flinched away, her eyes blazing with a hatred that scorched his soul. "Don't you dare touch me, you coward! You're 6 years too late for a conversation!" "I searched for you," Jin-woo said, his voice dropping to a gravelly, possessive register. He leaned in until their noses almost touched, his shadow completely enveloping her. "I burned down half of Europe looking for the woman who stole my ring and disappeared into the fog. Do not call me a coward, Anabella. Not when I've spent every night since then imagining how I'd punish you when I finally found you." "Punish me?" she laughed, a brittle, haunting sound. "You left me in a pool of blood and promises, Jin-woo. You didn't just leave me, you left the life we started. Now unbind me, or I swear to God I will show you exactly how vulnerable I am." Jin-woo didn't signal his men. He pulled a silver pocket knife and sliced the ropes himself. The moment she was free, Anabella swung, her palm connected with his cheek in a stinging slap that echoed through the chamber. The guards stepped forward, guns drawing, but Jin-woo raised a hand. His cheek was burning, but his heart was finally beating again. "Leave us!" Jin-woo commanded, never taking his eyes off her. "But sir, she's the one who was found at the site. I said get out!" His roar shook the walls. Once the door slammed shut, the silence was thick with 6 years of unsaid words. Jin-woo grabbed her waist, pulling her flush against his chest. Anabella gasped, her hands instinctively landing on his broad shoulders to push him away, but his grip was iron. He was a foot taller, a mountain of muscle and suppressed longing. "Where is he?" Jin-woo demanded, his voice shaking with a mixture of jealousy and wonder. "The boy, my son." "He isn't yours," she lied, though her voice wavered. "He's mine, just mine. You lost the right to that title when you chose your business over the woman you swore to protect." Jin-woo's eyes darkened. He moved his hand to the nape of her neck, his thumb tracing the pulse point that was racing under her skin. "I am a man of many sins, Anabella, but I am not a fool. He has my eyes, doesn't he? I saw the surveillance footage from the park. He walks like me. He looks like me. If you think I'm letting either of you out of my sight again, you've forgotten who I am." "I know exactly who you are," she spat, though her body was betraying her, softening against the heat radiating from him. "You're a monster who plays with lives. My son is innocent. He doesn't need a father who lives in the dark." "Then I'll bring him into the light," Jin-woo vowed. He leaned down, his lips brushing against her ear, his breath hot and intoxicating. "You're coming with me. From this second forward, you breathe because I allow it. You move because I lead you. You are mine, Anabella, and I am coming for everything that belongs to me." He didn't wait for her protest. He swept her off her feet, cradling her against his chest as if she were the most precious cargo in the world. She pounded against his chest, her small fists no match for his strength. He carried her out of the dungeon and into the elevator, his eyes fixed forward, glowing with a terrifying predatory possessiveness. He drove her to a secluded estate on the outskirts of Seoul, a fortress disguised as a palace. As they pulled through the gates, Anabella's defiance turned into a cold, sharp dread. She knew this man. She knew that beneath the tailored suits and the calm demeanor was a dragon that had been sleeping for 6 years. And now he was awake. He led her into a master suite that overlooked the Han River. The room was filled with flowers, lilies, her favorite. He had remembered. "You've been keeping tabs on me," she accused, turning to face him. "I've been watching you for 3 days," he admitted, unbuttoning his jacket and tossing it onto a chair. He moved toward her, loosening his tie, his movements slow and deliberate. "Since you stepped off that plane, I was going to approach you gently. I was going to win you back. But then you wandered into my territory, into the middle of a war zone. You could have died tonight. I've been dead for a long time, Jin-woo, ever since you left." He was in her space now, his presence overwhelming. He reached out and tucked a stray lock of her curly hair behind her ear. His touch was surprisingly gentle, a stark contrast to the violence of his world. "I had to leave. My father's enemies were closing in. If I had stayed, they would have used you to get to me. I thought you'd be safer if I was a ghost." "You thought wrong," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears she refused to shed. "I was hunted anyway. I spent years looking over my shoulder, wondering when the shadows would come for me, and when they finally did, I had to be strong for 2 people. Jin-woo's heart shattered. He dropped to his knees in front of her, his forehead resting against her stomach. It was an act of total submission from a man who knelt for no one. "Forgive me. I was a boy playing at being a king. Now I am a king, and I will burn this city to the ground before I let a single hair on your head be harmed again." Anabella reached down, her fingers trembling as they hovered over his dark hair. The tension between them was a living thing, a cord of electricity that threatened to snap. She wanted to run, but she was anchored by the raw, bleeding honesty in his voice. "You can't just keep us here," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Try to leave," he challenged, looking up at her with eyes that were both a promise and a threat. "See how far you get before I hunt you down and drag you back to my bed." The boldness of his words sent a shiver down her spine, not of fear, but of an old addictive heat. She had hated him for so long, but the moment his skin touched hers, she was reminded of why she had loved him. He was her ruin, and she was his only salvation. Suddenly, the doors burst open. A small boy, no older than 5, stood there with a toy sword. He had Jin-woo's sharp jawline and Anabella's radiant skin. "Mommy, who is the man crying on your tummy?" the boy asked, his voice high and curious. Jin-woo stood up slowly, his eyes widening as he beheld his son for the first time. The boy, Leo, tilted his head. There was no fear in the child's eyes, only a strange, innate recognition. "I'm not crying, little warrior," Jin-woo said, his voice thick with emotion. He crouched down to the boy's level, his face softening into a look of such pure, unadulterated love that Anabella felt her breath catch. "I'm just finally home." Leo walked closer, poking Jin-woo's arm. "You're big. Are you a giant?" "I'm whatever you need me to be," Jin-woo promised. Anabella watched them, her heart warring with her mind. She saw the way Jin-woo looked at Leo. It wasn't just fatherly pride, it was the look of a man who had found his reason for existing. But she also saw the way Jin-woo's eyes flickered to her when he thought she wasn't looking. There was a hunger there, a dark, possessive claim that told her her life was no longer her own. "Leo, go back to the playroom with Nanny Kim," Anabella said softly. "But I want to play with the giant." Jin-woo smiled, a rare, breathtaking sight. "I'll come play in a moment, Leo. I have to talk to your mother first about how we're never going to say goodbye again." As the boy left, the atmosphere shifted back to the heavy, magnetic tension of 2 lovers who had become enemies. Jin-woo walked back to Anabella, pinning her against the wall with his body. He didn't touch her with his hands, but his proximity was enough to make her heart race. "He is magnificent," Jin-woo whispered. And you are a goddess for raising him in that hell. But the hell ends tonight. You will live here. You will take my name, and you will never, ever mention another man in my presence. I never had another man, she confessed, the truth slipping out before she could stop it. Jin-peek's eyes flared with a triumphant, jealous fire. He leaned in, his lips a breath away from hers. Good. Because if you had, I would have had to kill him. Now, show me if you still remember how to breathe my name. He didn't kiss her. He waited, letting the agonizing pull of their chemistry do the work. Anabella's hands gripped his shirt, pulling him closer, her resistance crumbling like sand. She was drowning in him in the scent of sandalwood and power. Jin-woo, she breathed. The sound of his name on her lips was the final straw. He claimed her mouth with a hunger that spoke of 6 years of starvation. It wasn't a gentle kiss, it was a reclamation. It was a war. It was the beginning of a story that would either end in their total destruction or their ultimate union. As the rain continued to lash against the windows of the fortress, the Mafia King finally had his queen back, and he would let the world burn before he let her go again. He just promised to burn the world for her. If you want to see if he really does it, click subscribe and keep listening. The kiss ended, but the air remained charged, thick with the scent of rain and a decade's worth of unspoken longing. Jin-woo pulled back just an inch, his forehead resting against hers. His thumb traced the curve of her lower lip, his touch possessing a terrifying tenderness. This means I've forgiven you, Anabella whispered, her voice trembling even as her body leaned into his warmth. You dragged me here. You forced your way back into my life. But I didn't force my way back, Anabella. I simply stopped pretending you weren't the center of it, Jin-woo countered. He straightened up, his eyes regaining that cold, predatory sharpness that kept the underworld in check. You will stay in this room tonight. My men are stationed at every exit. Don't try the windows. The glass is reinforced and the drop is fatal. You're locking me in. Her eyes flashed with that fiery defiance he found so intoxicating. I'm the mother of your son, not a prisoner of war. Jin-woo reached out, his hand sliding into her hair, forcing her to look up at him. In my world, those two things are often the same. You are the most vulnerable part of me, Anabella. That makes you the ultimate target. Until I've cleared the rats who leaked your location, you stay behind these walls, under my shadow. He turned on his heel and walked toward the door, stopping only to look back over his shoulder. Dinner will be sent up. Wear the dress on the bed. We have guests arriving at midnight, and I need the world to see exactly who you belong to. I don't belong to anyone, she shouted at his retreating back, but the click of the heavy lock was her only answer. Anabella collapsed onto the massive silk-covered bed, her heart hammering against her ribs. She looked at the dress he had mentioned. It was a deep midnight blue velvet, cut to hug every curve of her body. It was elegant, expensive, and screamed of his possession. She hated him. She hated how he could make her feel like a queen and a captive in the same breath. But most of all, she hated that she still felt the ghost of his lips on hers. Downstairs, the atmosphere was vastly different. Jin-woo entered his study, where Min-ho and several other high-ranking members of the park syndicate were waiting. The air turned frigid the moment Jin-woo took his seat behind the mahogany desk. Talk, Jin-woo commanded. The leak came from the Choi family, Min-ho reported, his voice steady despite the murderous aura radiating from his boss. They knew about the girl. They were planning to snatch her from the warehouse before we got there. They wanted leverage to force you out of the southern territories. Jin-woo's eyes narrowed into lethal slits. He picked up a crystal glass of whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light. The Choi family wants leverage? They want to use my woman and my son as pawns? He crushed the glass in his bare hand. The shards bit into his palm, blood blooming across his skin, but he didn't even flinch. Bring me Choi Tae-yoon's head. Not tomorrow. Tonight. Sir, a direct attack on the Choi estate will start a full-scale war, one of the elders cautioned. Jin-woo leaned forward, the blood from his hand dripping onto the white blotter on his desk. Then let it be war. If they so much as breathe the name of the woman in the penthouse, I will erase their bloodline from the history books. Min-ho, prepare the cars. We go in at 11. As the men scrambled to follow his orders, Jin-woo remained in his chair, staring at the blood on his palm. It was a familiar sight, but for the first time in 6 years, the violence felt purposeful. He wasn't just fighting for territory anymore, he was fighting for his heart. Back in the master suite, Anabella had bathed and dressed. She stared at herself in the mirror, the blue velvet draped over her curves like a second skin, the rich color making her mahogany complexion glow. She looked powerful, but she felt like a bird in a gilded cage. A soft knock came at the door. It wasn't the heavy, authoritative thud of Jin-woo's knock. She opened it to find Leo standing there, dressed in a tiny, perfectly tailored suit that mirrored Jin-woo's. Mommy, look, I'm a prince! Leo chirped, spinning around. Behind him stood an elderly woman with a kind face, Nanny Kim. The master requested the young master be ready for the evening's introductions, ma'am. Anabella felt a pang of protectiveness. She knelt down, smoothing Leo's hair. Leo, remember what I told you. If things get loud or scary, you go with Nanny Kim immediately, okay? Is the giant going to fight bad guys? Leo asked, his eyes wide. The giant is going to ensure no one ever scares you again. A deep voice rumbled from the hallway. Jin-woo stepped into the room. He had changed into a fresh suit, his dark hair slicked back. He looked every bit the ruthless mafia king, but when his eyes landed on Anabella, they softened with a heat so intense she had to look away. He walked over, dismissing the nanny with a nod, and stood behind Anabella. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a necklace, a heavy strand of black diamonds with a central sapphire the size of a pigeon's egg. He draped it around her neck, his cool fingers lingering on her collarbone. "This is too much," she whispered, the weight of the gems feeling like shackles. "It's a statement," Jin-woo murmured against her ear. "In this city, black diamonds are the mark of the Park family. By wearing this, you are telling every man in that ballroom that to look at you is to invite death, to touch you is to ensure it. You're obsessed with branding me," she said, turning in his arms, her chest brushed against his, the velvet of her dress catching on the fine wool of his suit. "I am obsessed with keeping you," he corrected, his hand sliding down to the small of her back, pulling her flush against his hips. The possessiveness in his gaze was suffocating and intoxicating all at once. "6 years ago, I let you walk away because I was weak. I will never be weak again, Anabella, not where you are concerned." The gala was held in the grand ballroom of the estate. It was a gathering of the city's elite, corrupt politicians, rival gang leaders, and wealthy businessmen who all paid tribute to the Park name. When the grand doors opened and Jin-woo appeared at the top of the stairs with Anabella on his arm and Leo at his side, the room fell into a deafening silence. The whispers started immediately. "Who is she? Is that really his son?" Jin-woo led her down the stairs with the grace of a monarch. He didn't care about the whispers, he cared only for the way Anabella's hand trembled slightly on his arm. He squeezed her hand, a silent promise of protection. As they reached the floor, a man with a scarred face and a sneering lip stepped forward. "Choi Tae-yoon, the head of the rival family." Jin-woo, Choi said, his eyes raking over Anabella with a disgusting, hungry familiarity. "I see you finally brought your hidden treasures out into the light. She's exquisite, truly a rare find for a man like you." Jin-woo's grip on Anabella's waist tightened so hard she gasped. His eyes turned into chips of obsidian. "Choi, I'd advise you to keep your eyes on your glass. The woman by my side is not a find. She is the lady of this house, and the boy is my heir." Choi chuckled, a dry, grating sound. "An heir? Bold move, considering how many people would love to see the Park line ended tonight. Tell me, lovely lady, does he treat you well? Or do you miss the freedom of the streets?" Before Choi could finish his sentence, Jin-woo had him by the throat. It happened so fast the crowd barely had time to blink. Jin-woo's hand was a vice, cutting off the man's air as he lifted him slightly off the ground. Jin-woo, stop!" Anabella whispered, her heart leaping into her throat. "Not in front of Leo!" Jin-woo glanced at Leo, who was being shielded by Min-ho a few feet away. He leaned into Choi's ear, his voice a low, vibrating growl that sent shivers of terror through the surrounding guests. "If you ever speak to her again, if you even breathe in her direction, I will peel the skin from your bones while you're still conscious. Do you understand me?" He flung Choi away like he was trash. The rival leader stumbled back, gasping for air, his face mottled purple. He glared at Jin-woo, but the sheer, unhinged violence in the Mafia King's eyes forced him to back down. "This isn't over, Park!" Choi wheezed before disappearing into the crowd. Jin-woo turned back to Anabella, his expression shifting instantly back to one of concerned devotion. He tucked a stray hair behind her ear, his touch light as a feather. "Are you all right?" "You're a monster," she breathed, her eyes wide with shock. "You almost killed him in front of everyone." "I would kill the world for you," he said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the universe. "Let's get Leo upstairs. The air here is foul." Bar later that night, after Leo had been tucked into his new, high-security bedroom, Anabella stood on the balcony of the master suite. The city of Seoul sprawled out before her, a glittering tapestry of lights. She felt a presence behind her, the scent of whiskey and expensive tobacco. Jin-woo didn't say anything. He simply stood behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her back against his chest. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling deeply. "I can't do this, Jin-woo," she said, her voice cracking. "I can't live in a world where blood is the currency and every dinner party ends in a death threat." "You don't have to do anything but stay by my side," he murmured, his lips grazing her skin. "I will be the shield between you and the blood. I will be the one who carries the sins so you and Leo can walk in the light." "And what happens when your enemies realize that I'm your only weakness?" she asked, turning in his arms. Jin-woo looked down at her, his dark eyes filled with a raw, terrifying honesty. "Then I will become their greatest nightmare. I've spent 6 years feeling nothing, Anabella, just a hollow shell moving through the motions of power. But the moment I saw you in that basement, the world came back in color. I am possessive, yes. I am jealous. I am a man who takes what he wants, and I want you to be mine, heart, body, and soul." He leaned down, his lips hovering just inches from hers. The push and pull, the magnetic tension that had been building since Marseille, reached a breaking point. Anabella reached up, her fingers tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck. "Bar, I hate you," she whispered. "I know," he breathed against her mouth. "Hate me all you want. Just don't ever leave me again." He kissed her then, a slow, deep, and intoxicating exploration. It wasn't the angry reclamation of the basement, it was a desperate plea. He tasted of fire and longing, and Anabella found herself responding with a hunger that scared her. She was losing herself to him, falling back into the gravity of a man who would destroy anything to keep her. But as they stood there, lost in each other, a red laser dot appeared on the railing of the balcony, just inches from Anabella's hand. Jin-woo saw it a split second before it moved to her chest. "Get down!" He tackled her to the floor, just as a high-powered rifle bullet shattered the glass door behind them. The shards rained down on them like diamonds, and the alarms of the estate began to wail. Jin-woo rolled her beneath him, using his massive frame to shield her entirely. His eyes were no longer those of a lover, they were the eyes of a god of war. "Min-ho! Lock down!" He roared into his wrist comms. He looked down at Anabella, his face inches from hers. They just made the last mistake of their lives. "Jin-woo, your shoulder!" she gasped, seeing the blood soaking through his white shirt where a shard of glass had sliced deep. "It's nothing," he snapped, his voice cold and hard. "Stay on the floor! Don't move until I come back for you!" He pulled a sleek black handgun from a holster she hadn't even noticed and stood up, moving with a lethal efficiency that made her breath catch. He was the Mafia King, and his territory had been violated. As he vanished into the darkness of the hallway to hunt the assassins, Anabella lay on the cold floor, the sapphire around her neck feeling like a brand. She realized then that Jin-woo was right. She wasn't just his woman, she was his war, and the battle had only just begun. The screams of the alarm were drowned out by the thunder in Anabella's ears. She pressed her back against the cold marble floor, the scent of gunpowder and expensive cologne swirling in the air. Jin-woo was gone, a phantom of vengeance stalking through the darkened corridors of the estate. She could hear the rhythmic thud-thud-thud of silenced gunfire echoing from the gardens below. "Leo!" she gasped, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. She scrambled to her feet, ignoring the glass shards that bit into her palms. She didn't care about the sniper. She didn't care about the war. She sprinted toward the nursery, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The hallway was a gauntlet of shadows, but she burst into Leo's room, her breath hitching. The room was empty. "Leo!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "Nanny Kim! They're safe, Anabella!" She spun around to find Min-ho standing in the doorway, his tactical vest slick with rain and his expression grim. He held a submachine gun across his chest. "The master had them moved to the underground bunker the second the perimeter was breached. You need to come with me. Now. I'm not going anywhere until I see him." she defied, her eyes blazing. But Master is currently clearing the north wing. He gave me strict orders, your life above all else. If I let you stay here, he'll have my head. Min-ho grabbed her arm, his grip firm but respectful. Please, for the sake of the boy, move! As they hurried through the Secret Service passages, the sounds of combat grew more intense. Anabella's mind was a whirlwind of Jin-woo. She pictured him in the dark, the way his eyes turned into cold obsidian when he was pushed, the way he moved with that terrifying, predatory grace. She had spent years trying to erase him, but in the face of death, she realized she was still tethered to him by 1,000 invisible threads. They reached the bunker, a high-tech reinforced room deep beneath the estate. Leo was there, sitting on a plush sofa, clutching his toy sword. When he saw Anabella, he bolted toward her. "Brr, Mommy, the giant told me we were playing Fortress. He said I have to guard the door." Anabella pulled him into her lap, burying her face in his hair, her tears finally falling. "Yes, baby, you're doing a great job! A very good job!" For 2 hours they sat in the suffocating silence of the bunker. Every few minutes, a screen on the wall flickered, showing black and white feeds of the estate. She saw flickers of movement, men in tactical gear falling, the flash of muzzles. And then she saw him. Jin-woo appeared on the screen in the main foyer. His shirt was torn, soaked in a mixture of rain and blood. He was dragging a man by the collar, one of Choi's top lieutenants. Jin-woo's face was a mask of primal fury. He didn't look like a CEO or a businessman. He looked like a demon reclaimed from the pits of hell. He shoved the man against a pillar, his lips moving in a silent interrogation before he delivered a blow that ended the feed. Anabella shuddered. This was the man who had kissed her with such desperate longing only an hour ago. This was the father of her child. Bar! The heavy steel door of the bunker finally hissed open. Jin-woo stepped in, and the air in the room immediately changed. It became heavy, charged with the electricity of his presence. He was covered in grime, his knuckles split and bleeding, but his eyes went straight to Anabella. He didn't say a word. He walked over, his boots heavy on the floor, and reached down. He lifted her from the sofa, pulling her into a crushing embrace. He smelled of iron, smoke, and the cold night air. He buried his face in her neck, his breath coming in ragged, shaky gasps. "You're safe," he rasped, his voice vibrating through her chest. "You're safe. You're bleeding, Jin-woo," she whispered, her hands shaking as she touched the wound on his shoulder. "It's not mine," he said, and the coldness in his tone made her blood run cold. He pulled back, his hands framing her face, his thumbs brushed away her tears, his touch possessive and frantic. "I told you, I will burn this city to the ground before I let them touch you." "Burr, is it over? Burr, it's just beginning," he vowed. He looked over at Leo, who was watching them with wide, curious eyes. Jin-woo's expression softened instantly, a transformation that never failed to leave Anabella breathless. He walked over and knelt before the boy. "Did you guard the fortress, Leo?" "Burr, yes, sir. No bad guys got in." Jin-woo ruffled the boy's hair, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Good man. Min-ho will take you to the guest house. It's safer there while we clean up the mess." Once Leo and the guards were gone, the bunker felt smaller. The tension between Jin-woo and Anabella snapped back into place. He turned to her, his eyes raking over her body to ensure she was truly unharmed. "You're leaving," he said. Anabella blinked. "I'm sending you and Leo to a private island off the coast of Jeju. Tonight, Choi has declared open season. He's desperate, and desperate men are unpredictable. I can't protect you effectively while I'm on the offensive." "No," she said, stepping toward him. Her fear had turned into something sharper, something more primal. "You don't get to decide that. You dragged us back into this life. You claimed us. You don't get to ship us away the moment things get difficult." Jin-woo's jaw tightened. He moved into her space, his towering frame casting a long shadow over her. "This isn't a request, Anabella. It's an order. I cannot lose you again. 6 years was an eternity. If I see a bullet headed for you and I can't stop it, I will lose my mind. I need you where the world can't find you." "And what about you?" she challenged, poking his chest with a finger. "You're going to stay here and play the martyr? You think I can just sit on a beach while you're being hunted like an animal?" Jin-woo grabbed her hand, his grip ironclad. He pulled her flush against him, his eyes burning with a jealous, protective fire. "I am the hunter, not the prey, but I am distracted when you are near. Your scent, your voice, it makes me soft. It makes me want to stay in bed and hide from the world. I can't afford to be soft right now. Then let me be your strength, not your distraction, she whispered, her voice softening. She reached up, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. I'm not the same girl from Marseille, Jin-woo. I've survived 6 years without a king. I'm not afraid of the dark anymore. The magnetic pull between them was unbearable. Jin-woo groaned, a low, guttural sound, and slammed his mouth onto hers. This kiss was desperate, fueled by the adrenaline of the battle and the terror of losing her. He tasted of copper and rain, and Anabella met his intensity with her own, her hands clutching his damp shirt. He backed her against the cold steel wall of the bunker, his body pinning her there. He was a wall of muscle, his heart beating a frantic rhythm against her breast. You are so stubborn, he muttered against her lips, his breath hitching. So beautiful, so dangerous. You made me this way, she countered, her breath hitching as his hand slid down to her hip, his fingers digging into the velvet of her dress. The possessiveness in his gaze was absolute. He looked at her as if she were the only fixed point in a spinning universe. If you stay in my sight. You sleep in my bed. You don't leave the house without a dozen men. You become the shadow of the king. Bordel, she whispered. The next few days were a blur of high-tension strategy. Jin-woo transformed the estate into a literal command center. He barely slept, his eyes constantly fixed on monitors and maps. But every night, regardless of the hour, he would return to the master suite. He would find Anabella waiting for him. Sometimes she was asleep, her curly hair splayed across his silk pillows, and he would simply stand at the edge of the bed and watch her for an hour, grounding himself in the fact that she was real. Other times she would be awake and they would sit in the darkness talking in low whispers about the 6 years they had lost. I had a daughter, she confessed one night, her voice barely audible. Jin-woo froze, his hand pausing its caress of her shoulder. In the 3rd year, I was seeing someone, a doctor. He was kind, he made me feel safe. But the baby, she didn't make it, a complication in the 7th month. The silence that followed was suffocating. Jin-woo's grip on her tightened, his body turning rigid with a complex cocktail of jealousy and grief. He hated that another man had touched her, had seen her vulnerable, but the pain in her voice surpassed his own pettiness. What was his name? Jin-woo asked, his voice dangerously low. It doesn't matter. He's gone. He couldn't handle the ghosts I was carrying. He realized I was never really there with him. I was always waiting for a man who wasn't coming back. Jin-woo turned her to face him, his eyes searching hers in the moonlight. I'm sorry, he whispered, and for the first time he sounded like the boy she had met in Marseille. I should have been there. I should have been the one to hold you. Here now, she said. Will never leave out. He should be glad he's gone, because if I ever see him, I'll kill him for every tear he let you cry. Always so violent, she sighed, but she pressed her forehead against his chest. The war with the Choi family reached its peak on a Thursday. Choi Tae-yoon had been backed into a corner, his assets frozen and his men defecting to Jin-woo's side. But a cornered rat is the most dangerous. A package arrived at the gates. It wasn't a bomb, it was a tablet. Jin-woo opened it in the study, Anabella standing by his side. The screen flickered to life, showing a live feed of a warehouse. In the center of the room, tied to a chair, was Anabella's brother, Marcus. Barcus! She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Hello, Jin-woo! Choi's voice came through the speakers, distorted and mocking. You thought you could hide your family in a fortress? You forgot that some roots go deeper. You have 1 hour. The warehouse at Pier 47. Bring yourself unarmed, or I start sending Marcus back to his sister, piece by piece. The screen went black. Jin-woo didn't hesitate. He began checking his weapons, a sleek handgun, a knife in his boot, a garrote wire. You're not going alone, Anabella said, her voice trembling but firm. This is exactly what he wants, Anabella. It's a trap. He's my brother, Jin-woo, the only family I had when you were gone. He helped me raise Leo. I am not letting him die because of your war. Jin-woo grabbed her by the shoulders, his eyes fierce. And I am not letting you walk into a slaughterhouse. I will get him. I will bring him back. But you stay here. If you go alone, he'll kill you both, she argued. Choi doesn't want Marcus. He wants you. He wants to watch you break. If I'm there, if he thinks he has me too, he'll get overconfident. He'll talk. It'll buy you time. "Bar, no!" Jin-woo roared. "I will not use you as bait! Bar, I'm not asking to be bait. I'm asking to be your partner." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the magnetic, explosive chemistry that had always defined them. "You said I was your queen. Well, a queen doesn't hide in a bunker while her king goes to his death." Jin-woo stared at her, the conflict playing out across his handsome face. He was torn between his obsessive need to protect her and his growing respect for her strength. Finally, he leaned in, his lips crashing against hers in a hard, bruising kiss. "If a single hair on your head is touched," he warned, his voice a dark promise, "I will not just kill him. I will make sure the name Choi is never spoken again in this country." "Bar, I know," she whispered. They arrived at Pier 47 as the sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gold. The warehouse was a hulking skeleton of rusted steel. Jin-woo stepped out of the black SUV, his hand resting on the small of Anabella's back. He was a pillar of cold, lethal power. "Remember," he murmured, his voice barely audible, "stay behind me. If I say run, you run, and don't look back." They entered the warehouse. The air was thick with the smell of salt and rot. In the center, under a single spotlight, Marcus sat slumped in a chair, his face bruised. Behind him stood Choi, surrounded by 10 men with rifles. "Ah, the happy couple," Choi sneered, clicking the safety off his handgun. "And look at that! The lady herself came to watch the show." Jin-woo stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Choi. The aura of power radiating from him was so intense that several of Choi's men visibly flinched. "Let the boy go, Choi! You have me! This is between us!" "Bar, is it?" Choi laughed. "You took everything from me, Jin-woo. My territory, my reputation, my father's respect. I don't just want you dead. I want you to feel the void I've been living in." Choi pointed the gun at Anabella, but Jin-woo's reaction was instantaneous. He moved in front of her, his body a human shield. "Touch her, and I will tear your heart out with my bare hands." Such passion," Choi mocked. "But let's see how your passion holds up against lead." Suddenly, Marcus kicked out, toppling his chair and creating a momentary distraction. "Now!" Jin-woo screamed. He pulled his gun with a speed that defied human sight. The warehouse erupted into a symphony of violence. Anabella dove behind a stack of crates, her heart in her throat as she watched Jin-woo move. He was a whirlwind of death, a blur of motion that left men falling in his wake. He wasn't just fighting, he was protecting. Every move he made was designed to keep the fire away from her. She saw Choi aiming for Jin-woo's back. "Jin-woo, behind you!" Jin-woo spun, but he was a fraction of a second too late. The shot rang out, echoing through the hollow space. Anabella felt the world slow down. She saw the blood bloom on Jin-woo's side as he stumbled. She saw the look of horror on his face, not for himself, but because he was no longer standing between her and the enemy. Choi stepped toward her, a crazed grin on his face. "Finally, the king falls, and the queen is mine." But Anabella didn't scream. She didn't cower. She reached into her boot and pulled the small, pearl-handled dagger Jin-woo had given her for luck. As Choi reached for her curly hair, she lunged. If you are still here, your heart already belongs to this story. Tap subscribe so you do not lose the next chapter. The blade caught the light for a fraction of a second before it sank deep into Choi's shoulder. He howled, a sound of pure shock and agony, dropping his weapon as he recoiled. He hadn't expected the trophy to have teeth. Anabella didn't wait for him to recover. She scrambled toward Marcus, her hands flying to the knots binding him. "Marcus, wake up! We have to move!" she hissed, her voice a mix of terror and adrenaline. Across the warehouse floor, Jin-woo was back on his feet. The bullet had grazed his ribs, leaving a searing trail of fire, but it hadn't slowed the demon inside him. If anything, seeing Choi lay a hand on Anabella had snapped the final tether on his humanity. He didn't use his gun anymore. He moved like a shadow, closing the distance between him and Choi's remaining guards with a brutality that was sickening to behold. One guard tried to raise a rifle. Jin-woo snapped his wrist with a sickening crack and used the man as a shield against a second shooter. He was a symphony of lethal precision. By the time he reached Choi, the rival leader was clutching his bleeding shoulder, crawling toward a fallen pistol. Jin-woo's boot came down on Choi's hand, crushing the bones beneath his heel. You touched her!" Jin-woo whispered. The warehouse was suddenly quiet, save for Choi's whimpering. Jin-woo leaned down, grabbing the man by the hair and forcing him to look into eyes that held no mercy, only the cold, hard vacuum of the abyss. "I told you what would happen. I told you I would erase you." "Jin-woo, stop!" Anabella's voice cut through the darkness. She had freed Marcus, and they were standing by the crates. Marcus was shaky but alive. She looked at Jin-woo, and for a moment she didn't recognize him. The man standing over Choi wasn't her lover. He was the king of the underworld, a judge and executioner in one. Jin-woo didn't look at her. His gaze remained locked on Choi. "Minho, take Marcus and Anabella to the cars now." "Bert, no! Not without you!" she cried out. "Bart, take them!" Jin-woo roared, his voice echoing off the corrugated steel walls. Minho appeared from the shadows, his face grim. He guided a protesting Anabella and a dazed Marcus toward the exit. As the heavy doors groaned shut behind them, the last thing Anabella saw was Jin-woo's silhouette against the flickering warehouse lights, a dark god about to collect a debt in blood. The ride back to the estate was silent. Anabella sat in the back of the SUV, her hands stained with Choi's blood and her mind a chaotic storm. She looked at Marcus, who was leaning his head against the window, his eyes closed. I'm sorry, Marcus," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I dragged you into this." Marcus opened one eye, a weary smile touching his bruised lips. "You didn't drag me in, Bella. I've known who that man was since Marseille. I knew he'd come back for you. He's like a storm. You don't choose when it hits. You just try to survive the rain." "He's changed," she murmured, looking down at her trembling fingers. "Or maybe I just didn't want to see who he really was." "He hasn't changed," Marcus countered. "He's just stopped hiding it. He loves you, Bella. In his own twisted, terrifying way, he would burn the world to keep you warm. The question is, are you ready to be the queen of the ashes?" They arrived at the estate, and Anabella immediately rushed Leo to her room, holding him tight until the boy fell back into a restless sleep. She stayed by the window, watching the gates. An hour passed, then 2. The moon climbed high over the Seoul skyline, cold and indifferent. Finally, a single black sedan pulled into the driveway. Anabella ran down the stairs, her heart in her throat. The front door opened and Jin-woo stepped inside. He'd stripped off his tactical vest and his ruined shirt. A white bandage was wrapped around his torso, already blooming with a small spot of red. He looked exhausted, his face smeared with grease and dried blood, but his eyes were bright with a fierce, possessive triumph. He saw her at the foot of the stairs and stopped. Anabella didn't say a word. She moved like a blur, throwing her arms around his neck. Jin-woo groaned as her weight hit his injured side, but he wrapped his massive arms around her, lifting her off her feet and burying his face in her hair. He held her with a desperation that bordered on pain, his fingers digging into her back as if checking to ensure she wasn't a ghost. "He's gone!" Jin-woo rasped against her ear. "Choi is no longer a threat to you, to Leo, to anyone." Anabella pulled back, her eyes searching his. "What did you do, Jin-woo?" "I did what was necessary," he said, his voice hardening. "I secured our future." He led her up the stairs to the master suite, his hand never leaving the small of her back. Once the doors were closed, the silence of the room felt heavy. Jin-woo sat on the edge of the bed, his head dropping into his hands. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the raw ache of his wounds and the weight of his crown. Anabella moved between his knees. She took a warm cloth and began to gently wipe the grime from his face. Her touch was a stark contrast to the violence of his night. As she cleaned the blood from his knuckles, she felt his eyes on her, heavy, intense, and filled with a longing that made her breath hitch. "You should hate me," he murmured, his voice a low rumble. "After what you saw tonight, after the monster I showed you." "I should," she agreed, her voice soft as silk. She looked up, her dark eyes meeting his obsidian ones. "But I saw something else tonight. I saw a man who was willing to die to keep me safe. I saw the father of my son standing in the fire so we wouldn't have to." Jin-woo grabbed her wrists, pulling her hands to his chest. He leaned forward until their foreheads touched. "I am a jealous man, Anabella. I am possessive. When I see you look at another man, even your brother, a part of me wants to claim you so thoroughly the world forgets you exist. I want to lock you in this house and keep you for myself. But tonight, when I saw you lunge at Choi, I realized I don't just want a captive, I want a partner." "You have one," she whispered. The chemistry between them flared, hot and addictive. Jin-woo pulled her onto his lap, his hands sliding up her thighs, the rough skin of his palms a delicious friction against her mahogany skin. He kissed her then, a deep, slow exploration that tasted of survival and heat. It was the push and pull of their history finally finding a center. He broke the kiss to look at her, his breathing heavy. Marry me officially, no more secrets, no more Marseille. I want the world to know you are the Lady Park. I want every enemy I have to understand that to touch you is to declare war on a king who has nothing left to lose. And if I say no, she challenged, a small, playful smile dancing on her lips despite the gravity of the night. Jin-woo's eyes darkened with a possessive fire. He flipped her onto the bed, pinning her beneath him with his massive frame. He looked down at her, his hands framing her head, his presence overwhelming. Then I'll keep you here anyway. I'll chase you to the ends of the earth. I'll buy the air you breathe until you realize there is no world for you without me. You're a madman, she breathed, her heart racing. Bar, I am a man in love with you, he corrected. There is no difference. The following week was a whirlwind of power plays. With the Choi family decimated, Jin-woo moved to consolidate the remaining territories. He was ruthless in business, but at home, he was a different man. He spent hours with Leo, teaching the boy to play chess, their dark heads bent together in concentration. Anabella watched them from the doorway, her heart full. She saw the way Leo looked up at Jin-woo, not with fear, but with hero worship, and she saw the way Jin-woo looked at the boy with a tenderness that he showed no one else. But the peace was fragile. One afternoon, while Anabella was in the garden, a black car she didn't recognize pulled up to the gates. Out stepped a woman of immense elegance and sharp features, Madame Park, Jin-woo's estranged mother. She walked into the house as if she still owned it, her eyes raking over the decor with disapproval. When she saw Anabella, her lip curled in a way that reminded Anabella painfully of Jin-woo's coldness. "So," Madame Park said, her voice like cracking ice, "this is the distraction that has caused my son to burn down half of Seoul's underworld. You're beautiful, I'll give you that, but beauty is a common currency in our world. Loyalty, however, is rare." Annabella stood her ground, her head high. "I don't know who you are, but you're in my home." "Your home?" the older woman laughed. "This house was built on the blood of the Park family. You are a guest here, child, a temporary fixture until Jin-woo realizes that a king cannot rule with a heart made of glass." "My heart isn't glass, madame," Anabella countered, moving closer. "It's been forged in the same fire your son lives in, and if you think you can come here and intimidate me, you've clearly forgotten what kind of woman Jin-woo would choose." The two women stared each other down, a clash of generations and ideologies. The tension was interrupted by the sound of heavy footsteps. Jin-woo entered the foyer, his face turning into a mask of stone the moment he saw his mother. "Mother," he said, the word sounding like a curse, "I didn't invite you. I don't need an invitation to visit my own son, Joseph." She used his English name, a subtle jab at his past. "I heard you've been making reckless moves, eliminating the Choi family over a disagreement? The council is worried, Jin-woo. They think you've lost your edge." Jin-woo walked over to Anabella, wrapping a protective arm around her waist and pulling her flush against his side. The possessiveness in the gesture was loud and clear. "The council can think what they want. The Choi family violated my home. They threatened my wife and my heir. In my world, that is not a disagreement. It is an ending." "Or your wife?" Madame Park's eyes flew to Anabella's hand, where the black diamond ring now sat. "You've made it official? Without consulting the family?" "I am the family," Jin-woo snapped. "And if you ever speak to Anabella like that again, if you ever set foot in this house without my permission, I will treat you like any other intruder. Do you understand me?" The older woman looked at her son, seeing the raw, unyielding power in his eyes. She saw that he wasn't the boy she could control anymore. He was a man who had found his anchor, and that made him more dangerous than ever. "You're making a mistake, Jin-woo," she said, turning toward the door. "Weakness always finds a way to reveal itself. I hope for your sake she's worth the war you're about to start with the elders." Once she was gone, Jin-woo turned to Anabella, his face softening instantly. He cupped her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin. "I'm sorry, I should have warned you she was coming." "She's right about one thing," Anabella said, leaning into his touch. "The elders won't like this. You're breaking the old rules for me." "The old rules were written by men who didn't have anything worth fighting for," Jin-woo said, his voice dropping to a low, seductive register. He leaned in, his lips brushing hers. "I would break every rule in the world for you, Anabella. I would rewrite the laws of physics if it meant I could keep you for one more day." He picked her up, her legs naturally wrapping around his waist. He carried her toward the bedroom, his eyes fixed on hers with a magnetic intensity. "Let them come," he whispered against her skin. "Let the whole world come. I am the king of this city, and you are my queen, and as long as we are together, the shadows have no power." But as they lost themselves in each other, a new threat was forming in the dark. The Council of Elders, spurred on by Madame Park's reports, was meeting in a secret location. They saw Jin-woo's love for Anabella not as a strength, but as a fatal flaw, and they had already decided how to exploit it. The air in the grand study of the Park estate was cold, despite the crackling fire in the hearth. Jin-woo stood by the window, his silhouette rigid as he stared out at the sprawling city he ruled. Behind him, the monitors hummed, displaying encrypted data streams from across the globe. He was a man prepared for a siege, but the enemy he feared most wasn't one he could meet with a bullet. Anabella entered the room quietly, her silk robe trailing behind her. She moved into his space, sensing the storm brewing beneath his calm exterior. She wrapped her arms around his waist from behind, pressing her cheek against his broad, muscular back. "You haven't slept in 36 hours, Jin-woo," she murmured. "The council is quiet. Maybe your mother's visit was just a scare tactic." Beard Jin-woo turned in her arms, his hands coming up to frame her face. His thumbs traced the dark circles under her eyes, circles he knew he had put there. "My mother doesn't do scare tactics, Anabella. She does executions. If the elders are quiet, it's because they're repositioning. They don't strike at the king. They strike at the king's foundation." He pulled her closer, his grip possessive, his heart thudding against her chest. "I've doubled the security on Leo's school. Min-ho is personally overseeing the transport, but I need you to promise me something. If the alarms go off, if I am not by your side, you go to the safe room. You don't wait for me. You don't try to find me. Jin-woo, promise me!" he demanded, his voice cracking with a raw, desperate intensity. "I can survive a bullet, Anabella. I can survive losing my empire, but I cannot survive the world without you in it." The magnetic pull between them was tinged with the bitterness of looming danger. Anabella reached up, her fingers tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck, pulling him down for a kiss that tasted of salt and iron. It was a slow, deep reclamation. Even in his fear, Jin-woo was an anchor, his strength radiating through her. "Bar, I promise," she whispered against his lips. The blow came 2 days later, and it didn't come from the shadows, it came from the law. Jin-woo was at a board meeting for Park Industries when the doors were kicked in by a tactical team. Leading them wasn't a rival mobster, but General Naam, a man whose reputation for cleaning the city was legendary. "Park Jin-woo," the general announced, slapping a thick folder onto the conference table. "You are under arrest for high treason and the murder of Choi Tae-yoon. We have the footage, we have the witnesses." Jin-woo didn't flinch. He sat back in his leather chair, a cold, amused smile playing on his lips. "General, I didn't realize you were on the elders' payroll. I thought you were a man of the people." "Bar, I am a man of order," Nam replied, "and you have become a chaotic element. Take him!" As the handcuffs clicked shut over his wrists, Jin-woo caught Min-ho's eye across the room. A silent command passed between them: "Protect her." Anabella was in the library with Leo when the news broke. The television screens across the house flickered to life, showing Jin-woo being led out of the building in chains. The media was calling it the end of the Park dynasty. "Beer, Mommy, why is Daddy in trouble?" Leo asked, his lower lip trembling. Anabella felt a cold dread settle in her stomach, but she forced herself to be the wall Jin-woo had taught her to be. She knelt down, gripping Leo's shoulders. "Daddy is a hero, Leo, and sometimes people are afraid of heroes, but Nanny Kim is going to take you to the fortress now. It's time for another game." The moment the boy was out of the room, Anabella turned to Min-ho, who had burst in, his face pale. "They took him to the black site," Min-ho reported. "It's a military prison. No lawyers, no visitors. The elders moved through the general to bypass the syndicate's legal protections. They want to break him before they kill him." "They won't break him," Anabella said, her voice dropping to a low, lethal register. She stood up, the vulnerability of the past hour vanishing. She looked at the black diamond on her finger, the symbol of her husband's power. "If they want to play by military rules, we'll show them what a mafia queen can do." "Ma'am, the master gave orders for your safety." "Bar, the master is in a cage, Min-ho, and I am the only one with the key." She walked to Jin-woo's desk and opened the hidden compartment. Inside was a secondary ledger. the one that contained the dirty secrets of every general, politician, and elder in Seoul. Jin-woo kept this as a nuclear option. He refused to use it because it would destabilize the city. But they touched my husband. The city can burn for all I care. Inside the black site, Jin-woo was strapped to a metal chair in a room that smelled of ozone and damp concrete. A single light bulb swung above him. His shirt was gone, revealing the patchwork of scars from a lifetime of violence and the fresh bandage from the warehouse. General Nam stood before him, holding a cattle prod. "Where is the ledger, Jin-woo? Give us the names and I'll make sure your woman and child have a quick, painless end. Otherwise, my men can be very creative." Jin-woo looked up, blood dripping from a cut on his forehead. He laughed, a dark, chilling sound that echoed in the small room. "You think you're in control, Nam? You think the elders sent you here because they trust you? They sent you here to die, because they know that if I get out of this chair, I'm starting with the man who held the keys." "You aren't getting out," Nam sneered, pressing the prod against Jin-woo's ribs. The electricity surged through his body, arching his back and forcing a muffled groan from his throat, but even as his muscles spasmed, Jin-woo's mind was on Anabella. He could see her, her mahogany skin, her defiant eyes, the way she looked in that blue velvet dress. She was his light in a void. He would endure 1,000 deaths before he gave them a single word that could lead to her. Back at the estate, Anabella was a whirlwind of strategic fury. She had summoned the 7 Shadows, the elite hit squad that answered only to the head of the Park family. They stood in the foyer, a collection of the most dangerous men and women in the country, looking at her with skepticism. "The master is gone," one of them said. "Why should we follow a woman who wasn't even here a month ago?" Anabella walked up to the man, a giant of a soldier, and looked him dead in the eye. She didn't blink. "You follow me because I am the mother of the heir. You follow me because I have the ledger that can erase your families from existence. But mostly you follow me because I am the only one who knows that Park Jin-woo is the only thing standing between you and the general's firing squad." She tossed the ledger onto the table. "I've already sent the first page to the Prime Minister's office. If Jin-woo isn't free in 4 hours, the rest goes public. The city will fall, the government will collapse, and you'll all be hunted, or you can help me bring the king home." The Shadows looked at the ledger, then at the woman standing before them. They saw the fire in her, the same possessive, unyielding intensity that Jin-woo possessed. They realized then that she wasn't a distraction. She was the weapon Jin-woo had been honing for 6 years. They bowed. The assault on the black site was a masterpiece of chaos. Anabella didn't stay in the car. She wore tactical gear, her curly hair tucked under a helmet, a sleek submachine gun in her hands. She moved with the Shadows, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. "I'm coming for you, Jin-woo," she whispered, as they breached the outer perimeter with a series of synchronized explosions. Inside the interrogation room, the power flickered and died. The emergency red lights bathed the room in a bloody hue. Jin-woo, barely conscious, heard the distant sound of gunfire. A smile touched his lips. "That's my girl." The door was blown off its hinges. General Nam pulled his sidearm, aiming for Jin-woo's head. "If I go down, you're coming with me!" A shot rang out, but it didn't come from Nam. The general's hand disintegrated as a high-caliber round struck his pistol. He fell back, screaming. Anabella stepped through the smoke, her gun raised. She looked like a Valkyrie, her eyes burning with a cold, righteous fury. She didn't look at the general. She looked only at the man in the chair. "Anabella!" Jin-woo croaked, his voice filled with a mixture of pride and terror. She ignored the guards and rushed to him, her hands trembling as she began to undo the restraints. "I told you, Jin-woo, I'm not the girl from Marseille. I don't wait for ghosts." "You shouldn't be here," he gasped, his head falling against her shoulder the moment he was free. He was heavy, his body broken by the torture, but he wrapped his arms around her with a possessive strength that shocked her. He inhaled the scent of her, the vanilla and the gunpowder, and felt his soul return. "Quiet," she commanded, helping him stand. "We're leaving, now." They fought their way out of the facility, the Shadows creating a wall of lead around them. Jin-woo moved like a wounded tiger, using Anabella for support, his eyes fixed on the exit. As they reached the extraction point, a fleet of black SUVs roared up. But they weren't the general's men. They were the elder's personal guard, and leading them was Madame Park. She stepped out of the lead car, her face a mask of disappointment. You've caused quite a mess, Anabella. You've burned the leverage. You've exposed the syndicate. Anabella stepped in front of Jin-woo, shielding him with her own body. She leveled her gun at the woman who had birthed the man she loved. I didn't burn it all, madame. I kept the pages on you, the ones about how you sold out Jin-woo's father to the Choi family 20 years ago. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the soldiers lowered their weapons. Jin-woo pushed himself off Anabella, standing tall despite the agony. He looked at his mother, the realization dawning on him. Is it true? Jin-woo asked, his voice a low, vibrating growl of pure betrayal. Madame Park didn't answer, her silence the only confession needed. Leave, Jin-woo commanded, his voice carrying the weight of a final judgment. Leave this city! If I see you again, if I even hear your name, I will finish what the Choi family started. You are no mother of mine. The woman who had tried to rule the world from the shadows turned and entered her car without a word. The elder's guard followed, the power of the matriarch broken by a woman she had deemed a distraction. Back at the estate, the healing process began. Jin-woo was confined to bed, his body a map of bruises and burns, but he refused to let Anabella leave his side. He held her hand with a grip that never loosened, his eyes following her every movement with a feverish, addictive intensity. You saved me, he whispered one night as she sat by his bed, cleaning his wounds. We saved each other, she corrected. Jin-woo reached out, pulling her down until she was lying against his chest. He buried his face in her hair, his breath hitching. I was so afraid, not of the pain, but that I'd never get to tell you that I'm sorry for the 6 years, that I'm sorry I didn't see that you were the strongest person I've ever known. Don't be sorry, she said, looking up at him. Just be here. I am here, he vowed, his eyes darkening with that familiar possessive heat. He leaned in, his lips brushing hers. I am yours, in this life and the next. And now that the city knows what happens when they touch the queen, I think we'll have a little peace. But as the moon rose over the fortress, a new player was watching from the docks, a man with a scarred face and eyes that held the same fire as Jin-woo's. He held a photo of the family, a cigarette smoldering between his fingers. The war wasn't over. It had just changed fronts. You made it this far, your heart is already hooked. Click subscribe so you don't miss the next shock. The aftermath of the Black Site raid left the city in a state of breathless tension. The king had returned, but he was a king who had seen the deepest treachery of his own blood. Jin-woo's recovery was slow, but his mind was more active than ever. He spent his days in the master suite, surrounded by encrypted laptops and tactical maps, his possessiveness over Anabella reaching a fever pitch. He wouldn't let her leave the room for more than an hour at a time, and even then, he required a live video feed from her security detail. You're suffocating me, Jin-woo, Anabella said one morning as she adjusted the pillows behind his back. I'm not a porcelain doll. I'm the woman who broke you out of a military prison. Jin-woo grabbed her wrist, pulling her toward him until she was hovering inches from his face. His eyes were dark, rimmed with the exhaustion of his wounds and a deep-seated paranoia. You are the woman who has a target on her back because of me. Every breath you take outside this room is a breath I have to steal from the gods. I can't lose you, Anabella. Not now, not ever. You won't lose me, she promised, her voice softening as she traced the jagged scar on his shoulder. But you're going to lose your mind if you don't start trusting the walls you built. I don't trust walls. I trust my eyes on you, he rasped, pulling her down for a kiss that was both a plea and a claim. Their moment was interrupted by Min-ho's sharp knock. He entered with a tablet, his expression more troubled than usual. Sir, we've found the source of the new movement at the docks. It's not a rival family. It's the Syndicate of the East. They've sent a fixer to reclaim the territories left behind by the Choi family. Jin-woo's jaw tightened. The Syndicate of the East was a myth to most, a shadow organization that governed the underworld across the entire continent. If they were involved, it meant the local war had gone global. Who is the fixer? Jin-woo demanded. Min-ho hesitated, glancing at Anabella before sliding a photo across the screen. He goes by the name Ryusong-min, but you might recognize him, ma'am. Anabella looked at the screen and felt the blood drain from her face. The man in the photo had a sharp, predatory smile and eyes like chips of ice. He was the man she had mentioned to Jin-woo weeks ago, the doctor who had been kind to her during the years she was alone. the man who had fathered the child she lost. Song-min, she breathed, her hand going to her throat. The air in the room turned arctic. Jin-woo didn't move, but the aura of violence radiating from him was palpable. He looked from the photo to Anabella, his eyes burning with a jealous, murderous fire. The doctor who made you feel safe is a fixer for the most dangerous organization in Asia. It seems your past is as crowded as mine, Anabella. I didn't know Jin-woo. He was a surgeon at the clinic I worked at in Busan. He was just Song-min. Jin-woo stood up, ignoring the protest of his healing ribs. He towered over her, his presence overwhelming and terrifying. He wasn't just anyone. He was a predator waiting for his chance, and he used you to get close to the Park bloodline. He turned to Minho, his voice a low, vibrating growl. Where is he? He's taken over the old Choi warehouse. He sent a message, sir. He wants a meeting with the lady. Over my dead body, Jin-woo roared, slamming his fist into the bedside table. The wood splintered under his strength. Jin-woo, listen to me, Anabella said, stepping into his line of sight, her heart hammering. If he's here for me, it's because he thinks he has leverage. He knows about the baby. He knows my vulnerabilities. If you go in guns blazing, he'll use everything he has against you. He touched you, Jin-woo said, grabbing her shoulders, his fingers digging into her skin. He saw you. He held you. He lived the life I should have had. I will not meet him. I will erase him from the earth. And if he has Marcus, or if he knows where Leo's hidden files are, she countered. He was in my life for 2 years, Jin-woo. He's smart. He's a doctor. He knows how to dissect a person without a knife. The magnetic, explosive tension between them was at a breaking point. Jin-woo looked at her with such raw, agonizing possessiveness that it felt like a physical weight. He couldn't stand the thought of another man having a history with her, especially a man who was now an enemy. I will go, Anabella said firmly, but you will be my shadow. Like we planned, we don't do this separately anymore. The meeting was set for midnight at the docks in a derelict crane-loading bay. The rain had returned, a cold mist that blurred the lines between the sea and the sky. Jin-woo was stationed in a nest 500 yards away with a high-powered rifle, his finger on the trigger and his heart in a vice. He watched through the scope as Anabella, dressed in a black trench coat, walked toward the center of the bay. Ryu Song-min stepped out from behind a shipping container. He looked exactly as she remembered, composed, elegant, and chillingly calm. Anabella, he said, his voice smooth as silk. You've done well for yourself. From a struggling nurse to the queen of the Park Syndicate, I always knew you were destined for greatness. Cut the crap, Song-min, she spat, her hand hovering near the hidden holster at her waist. Why are you here? The Syndicate of the East doesn't care about a small port in Seoul. But they do care about the man who broke their favorite general, Song-min replied, taking a step closer. And they care about the woman who is his only weakness. You were always so soft, Bella, so easy to read, even when you were carrying that child. Your heart was always elsewhere. It was always with him. In the sniper nest, Jin-woo's knuckles were white. He could hear every word through the bug in Anabella's ear, his vision clouded with a red haze of jealousy. The child is gone, Anabella said, her voice trembling with a mix of grief and rage. And so is the woman you knew. I belong to Jin-woo now. Every part of me. Do you? Song-min laughed, a hollow, mocking sound. He's a monster, Bella. He's a killer who has spent his life building a throne of bones. Do you really think he can love someone like you? Or is he just possessive of a prize he lost and found? He loves me enough to be watching you through a scope right now, she countered, her eyes flashing. And he loves me enough to wait for my signal before he puts a bullet between your eyes. Song-min paused, his smile widening. I'm sure he is. But I didn't come here to talk about love. I came here to give you a choice. The Syndicate of the East is moving in. Jin-woo can either step down and hand over the port, or we start targeting the things he loves. Starting with that charming little boy, Leo. For the moment the name Leo left his lips, a shot rang out. It didn't hit Song-min, it struck the metal pillar inches from his head, a warning that shook the entire bay. Next one won't miss! Jin-woo's voice boomed through the dock's PA system, hacked by Minho. Step away from her, Ryu, now! Song-min didn't flinch. He looked up at the cranes, then back at Anabella. He's as impulsive as they say. That's why he'll lose. Tell him the offer stands for 48 hours. After that, the shadows come for the boy. Song-min vanished into the fog before Anabella could react. Jin-woo was down from the crane in seconds, sprinting toward her. He swept her into his arms, his heart beating a frantic, erratic rhythm. He checked her for injuries, his hands moving over her body with a frantic, possessive energy. "He's dead," Jin-woo vowed, his voice a dark, jagged thing. "I don't care who he works for. He threatened our son. He's dead." "Jin-woo, he wants you to react like this," she cried, grabbing his lapels. "He's baiting you. He knows your jealousy. He knows your temper. He wants you to lead your men into a trap at the dock so the syndicate can move on the estate." Jin-woo looked at her, his eyes wild. "I don't care about the estate. I care about the fact that he spoke your name. I care about the fact that he was with you when I wasn't." "Look at me," she commanded, her voice cutting through his mania. She cupped his face, forcing him to meet her gaze. "I am here. I am yours. He is nothing but a ghost from a time I've already buried. Do not let a ghost destroy what we've built." The honesty in her voice acted like a bucket of ice water on his fire. He leaned his forehead against hers, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "I hate that he knew you. I hate that he has memories of you that I don't." "But then let's make new ones," she whispered, "starting with a plan that actually works." They spent the next day turning the estate into an even tighter fortress. But Jin-woo's possessiveness had shifted. He wasn't just guarding her, he was reclaiming her. Every time they were in a room together, he found a reason to touch her, a hand on her waist, a lingering stroke of her hair, a possessive pull into his lap during strategy meetings. It was as if he were trying to overwrite every second she had spent with Song Min. "You're marking your territory again," she noted as they sat in the library, his hand resting firmly on her thigh as they reviewed the syndicate's troop movements. "Always," he admitted, his eyes never leaving the screen. "I want the world to see the bruises I leave on your soul, Anabella, so they know there's no room for anyone else." The night of the 48-hour deadline arrived. The air was thick with the scent of ozone. A storm was coming. Jin-woo hadn't left the house, but he had sent the shadows to the docks as a decoy. He knew Song Min wouldn't be there. He knew the fixer would come for the heart of the home. The perimeter was breached at 2:00 a.m. The power went out, plunging the estate into a suffocating darkness. Anabella followed the protocol, moving toward the safe room with Leo, but the hallway was suddenly blocked by a figure in a white lab coat, a haunting callback to her time in Busan. "Bella!" Song Min's voice echoed in the dark. "You always were a creature of habit." Anabella pushed Leo behind her, pulling her handgun. "Stay away from him, Song Min! I don't want the boy! I want the king to watch as I take back what was mine!" Song Min said, his voice devoid of its usual charm. He held a small, high-tech device, a sonic disruptor that made Anabella's ears ring and her knees buckle. Before she could pull the trigger, the door to the study burst open. Jin-woo emerged like a wraith, his eyes glowing with a terrifying unhinged light. He didn't use a gun. He lunged at Song Min with a primal roar, the two men crashing through the mahogany banister and falling to the foyer floor below. The fight was brutal. It wasn't the tactical combat of soldiers. It was the raw, ugly violence of two men fighting over the same woman. Song Min was fast, using a scalpel with surgical precision, leaving shallow cuts on Jin-woo's arms and chest. But Jin-woo was a force of nature. He ignored the pain, his only goal to crush the life out of the man who had dared to touch his queen. Anabella watched from the balcony, Leo hidden in the room behind her. She saw Jin-woo take a cut to the cheek, blood spraying across his white shirt. She saw him grab Song Min by the throat and slam him into the marble pillar. "Bart, you think you knew her?" Jin-woo hissed, his hand tightening around the man's neck. "You knew a shadow. You knew a girl who was broken. I know the woman who rose from those ashes, and she is mine!" Song Min gasped for air, his face turning purple. He reached into his pocket, pulling a small vial of neurotoxin, aiming for Jin-woo's neck. "But Jin-woo, no!" Anabella screamed. Jin-woo saw the movement. He didn't flinch. He grabbed Song Min's wrist and snapped it with a sound that made Anabella wince. The vial shattered on the floor, the toxic liquid sizzling against the marble. Jin-woo delivered one final bone-shattering blow that sent Song Min sprawling across the foyer, unconscious and broken. Jin-woo stood over him, his chest heaving, blood dripping from a dozen cuts. He looked up at Anabella, and for a second he looked like a monster. But then his eyes softened, the possessive fire turning into a look of such pure, raw relief that she felt her heart melt. Is he dead?" she whispered, walking down the stairs. "No," Jin-woo said, his voice a gravelly rasp. "I want the Syndicate of the East to see him. I want them to see what happens when they send a fixer into my home. Min-ho! Take him to the kennel. We'll send him back in pieces." He walked to Anabella, wrapping his bloody arms around her and pulling her into a crushing embrace. He buried his face in her neck, his body shaking with the aftershocks of the rage. "He's gone. He'll never look at you again. He'll never speak your name." "I know," she said, holding him tight. "I know." They stood there in the dark foyer, the silence returning to the house. But as they held each other, a red light began to blink on the fallen fixer's wrist. A tracker. The Syndicate of the East wasn't coming for the port anymore. They were coming for the king's head, and they were already at the gates. The crimson light on the fixer's wrist pulsed like a dying heart. Jin-woo pulled back from Anabella, his eyes snapping to the rhythm of the glow. The silence of the house was suddenly shattered by the distant heavy whump-whump-whump of rotor blades. "They aren't waiting for a response," Jin-woo growled, his voice losing its warmth and returning to the cold, lethal pitch of a commander. "Min-ho, anti-air protocols, get Leo to the deepest level." "Jin-woo, what is that?" Anabella asked, looking out the shattered foyer windows. A fleet of blacked-out helicopters crested the ridgeline, their searchlights sweeping the estate like the eyes of predatory gods. This wasn't a gang war, it was a military-grade strike. The Syndicate of the East had decided that the Park lineage was a cancer that needed to be cauterized. "It's the end of the game," Jin-woo said. He grabbed her hand, his grip so tight it was nearly painful, a physical manifestation of his refusal to let go. He led her toward the armory hidden behind the library's false wall. "They're not here to negotiate, they're here to level the mountain." He began tossing tactical vests and heavy weaponry onto the table. He moved with a terrifying efficiency, his wounds forgotten. He strapped a vest over Anabella's silk robe, his hands lingering for a second on her shoulders, pulling her flush against him. He kissed her forehead, his breath hot and ragged. "If we get separated, you go to the docks. Under the third pier, there's a submersible. The code is Leo's birthday. You take him and you go to the Philippines. I have people there who will hide you forever." "Pierre! I am not leaving you to die in our home, Jin-woo," she shouted over the growing roar of the engines outside. "Bam! I am the king!" he roared back, his eyes blazing with a possessive, unhinged fire. "And a king's job is to ensure his queen lives to see the dawn. Do not argue with me, Anabella, not tonight." But the first missile struck the north wing. The explosion rocked the foundations, sending a shower of plaster and dust over them. The lights flickered and died, replaced by the orange glow of the encroaching fire. Jin-woo grabbed a custom-built assault rifle and handed Anabella a sidearm. "Stay behind me. If I fall, you step over me and keep moving. Understand?" "Brr, I understand," she whispered, her eyes mirroring his intensity. They fought their way through the burning house. The Syndicate's erasers, elite soldiers in charcoal-gray tactical gear, were fast-roping onto the balconies. Jin-woo was a phantom of destruction. Every time an eraser appeared, he was met with a burst of precision fire. Jin-woo moved in a protective arc around Anabella, his body constantly positioned to take any stray fire. They reached the lower levels, where Min-ho was holding the line at the bunker entrance. The hallway was a gauntlet of smoke and lead. "Young master is inside," Min-ho shouted, his face blackened by soot. "But they've breached the kitchen. We're being flanked." "Bar, take her in," Jin-woo commanded. "No!" Anabella screamed as Jin-woo shoved her toward the steel door. "Bar, Min-ho, lock it!" The heavy door hissed shut, and Anabella's last sight of Jin-woo was him standing in the middle of the hallway, a lone titan against a wave of shadows, his eyes fixed on her with a look of such heartbreaking love and possessive fury that it scorched her soul. Inside the bunker, Leo was huddled in the corner, clutching his toy sword. He didn't cry. He looked at Anabella with Jin-woo's eyes, sharp, observant, and resilient. "Is the giant winning, Mommy?" Anabella checked her weapon, her hands shaking but her resolve turning to steel. "The giant is doing his job, Leo. Now it's time for us to do ours." Bershi turned to the monitors. The exterior camera showed the estate was a war zone. Hundreds of soldiers were swarming the grounds. Jin-woo was on the main staircase now, his silhouette framed by the roaring flames. He was fighting with a savagery that defied logic. He ran out of ammunition and drew 2 serrated knives, moving through the erasers like a reaper.br, but there were too many. She saw a soldier take aim at Jin-woo's back. Anabella didn't think. She remembered the override switch Jin-woo had shown her just in case. It controlled the internal security turrets, a system Jin-woo hated because of its risk to civilians. "Leo, cover your ears," she commanded. She slammed her hand onto the red console. The estate erupted, hidden panels in the walls slid open, and automated sentries began to sweep the hallways with lethal efficiency. On the screen, she saw the erasers being cut down, the tide of the battle shifting in an instant. But the system didn't distinguish between friend and foe. "Jin-woo, get down!" she screamed at the monitor, though he couldn't hear her. On the screen, Jin-woo dove behind a marble statue just as the turret above him opened fire. He looked toward the nearest camera, a bloody grin on his face. He knew it was her. He blew a kiss to the lens, a gesture so arrogant and so him that she laughed through her tears. The primary assault was broken, but the syndicate wasn't finished. A massive transport helicopter hovered over the roof, and a single man descended. The Grand Elder, the man who sat at the very top of the Syndicate of the East. He was old, his hair white and his face a map of ancient cruelty. He walked into the burning foyer, his path cleared by a phalanx of heavy shield-bearers. He looked at Jin-woo, who was leaning against the pillar, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Park Jin-woo!" The elder's voice was amplified, echoing through the burning halls. "You have fought well, but you have burned your world for a woman who is not of our blood. You have chosen a distraction over an empire." Jin-woo stood tall, his knives dripping with the blood of his enemies. "I didn't choose a distraction. I chose a reason to live. You old men sit in the dark and count your coins while the world moves on. I am the future of this city, and you are just a ghost waiting for the wind." "Then let the wind take you," the elder said, raising a hand. Wait!" The bunker door hissed open. Anabella stepped out into the foyer, her gun aimed at the Grand Elder. She was covered in soot, her robe torn, but she looked every bit the Queen Jin-woo had proclaimed her to be. "Anabella, get back!" Jin-woo roared, trying to move toward her, but his leg gave way, a bullet wound finally catching up to him. She ignored him. She looked at the Grand Elder, her eyes cold. "You want the Syndicate's secrets? You want the codes to the offshore accounts? I have them. I've linked them to a dead man's switch. If you kill him, if you kill either of us, the money vanishes. The accounts are erased. The Syndicate of the East becomes the Syndicate of Nothing." The elder paused, his eyes narrowing. He looked at the woman before him, seeing the fierce, possessive loyalty that mirrored the man he was trying to kill. He realized then that they weren't 2 separate targets. They were a single, unbreakable unit. "You would destroy the entire underworld for one man?" the elder asked. "I would destroy the world for my husband," she corrected, her voice steady. The tension in the room was a physical weight. The fire roared around them, the ceiling groaning under the heat. The elder looked at Jin-woo, then at Anabella. He saw the magnetic, explosive chemistry between them, the way Jin-woo's eyes never left her even as he bled out. "A king and his queen," the elder mused. "Very well, the Park family is interesting, but a king without a kingdom is no threat. We will leave, we will take the Choi territories. You keep your house, you keep your reason to live. But if you ever step foot outside Seoul, if you ever interfere with the Syndicate again, I will not send soldiers. I will send a plague." The elder signaled his men. They retreated as quickly as they had arrived, the helicopters lifting off into the smoke-clogged sky. The moment the soldiers were gone, Jin-woo collapsed. Anabella sprinted to him, catching him before his head hit the marble. She pulled him into her lap, her hands frantically searching for the source of the blood. "Jin-woo, stay with me! Joseph, look at me! I told you!" he rasped, a weak, triumphant smile touching his lips. "I told you I'd win." "You're an idiot," she sobbed, pressing her forehead against his. "A possessive, arrogant, beautiful idiot." "But I'm your idiot," he whispered. Min-ho and the surviving shadows emerged from the smoke, beginning the work of putting out the fires and securing the perimeter. The estate was a ruin, a skeleton of its former glory. But as the sun began to rise over the Han River, painting the smoke in shades of gold and pink, they were still standing. Leo walked out of the bunker, his toy sword still in hand. He walked over to his parents, looking at the blood and the fire with a strange, quiet dignity. He sat down next to Jin-woo, taking his father's hand. Is the game over, Daddy? Jin-woo looked at his son, then up at Anabella. He reached up, his bloody hand cupping her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin with a possessive, lingering heat. The game is over, Leo, Jin-woo said, his voice thick with emotion. Now, we just have to figure out how to be a family in the ashes. They sat there as the world woke up, a family of 3 framed by the ruins of an empire. But the peace was a lie. As they were being loaded into an ambulance, Min-ho pulled Anabella aside, his face grim. Ma'am, we found something in the fixer's belongings. Before he died, he sent a final transmission. To the syndicate, she asked. No, Min-ho said, handing her a small handwritten note. To Marseille. It seems your past isn't just ghosts and doctors, Anabella. It's a man who has been waiting 6 years for you to come home, and he's on a plane to Seoul. Anabella felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. She looked at Jin-woo, who was watching her with a jealous, suspicious intensity. Even through his pain, he saw the note in her hand. What is it? Jin-woo demanded, his voice returning to that low, possessive growl. Anabella crushed the note in her hand. Nothing, Jin-woo, just a ghost. But she knew better. The war hadn't ended. The front had just moved to the one place Jin-woo couldn't protect, her heart. The recovery of the Park estate took months, but the reconstruction of Jin-woo's psyche was an even slower process. The mansion rose from the ashes, grander and more fortified than before, a literal fortress of black marble and reinforced steel. But inside, the atmosphere was thick with a new kind of tension. Jin-woo's possessiveness had evolved from a protective shield into a consuming fire. He had survived the syndicate, the general, and the fixer, but the ghost from Marseille was a threat he couldn't shoot. Anabella stood on the balcony of the newly finished master suite, her eyes fixed on the driveway. She felt Jin-woo's presence before she heard him. The scent of expensive sandalwood and the heavy magnetic pull of his aura always preceded him. He wrapped his arms around her waist, his hands splayed across her stomach in a proprietary grip. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling deeply, his body molding to hers with an intensity that spoke of an addiction. You're thinking about him again, Jin-woo rasped, his voice vibrating against her spine. It wasn't a question, it was an accusation fueled by a jealousy that never slept. I'm thinking about the fact that we're living in a cage, Jin-woo, she replied, turning in his arms. She looked into his dark eyes, seeing the raw, unyielding love there, but also the shadow of the man who had spent 6 years in the dark. You've replaced the soldiers with walls, but the fear is the same. The fear is what keeps you alive, he countered, his hand moving to the nape of her neck, his thumb tracing the pulse that spiked under his touch. Min-ho tracked the flight. He's in Seoul, Anabella. Julian Vane, the man you almost married before you met me in that bar in Marseille. Anabella flinched at the name. Julian, the architect, the normal man who had offered her a life of white picket fences and quiet Sundays. A life that felt like a fairy tale compared to the storm she currently inhabited. He's not a threat to you, Jin-woo. He's a memory. Memories are the only things I can't kill, Jin-woo growled. He pulled her flush against his chest, his eyes flashing with an explosive territorial heat. But if he so much as breathes the same air as you, I will show him why they call me a monster. You are mine. In every timeline, in every memory, you belong to the House of Park. The confrontation happened sooner than expected. Julian Vane didn't come with guns, he came with a lawyer in a civil suit. He appeared at the gates of the estate, a stark contrast to the tactical-clad guards. He was tall, blonde, and possessed a gentle elegance that belonged to a world of museums and galas. Jin-woo met him in the grand foyer. The Mafia King stood at the top of the stairs, flanked by Min-ho and a dozen shadows. He looked down at Julian with a cold, murderous disdain. Anabella stood by his side, her hand resting on the banister, her heart a chaotic mess of past and present. You have 10 seconds to state your business before I have my men remove your tongue, Jin-woo announced, his voice echoing like a death knell. Julian looked up, his gaze fixing on Anabella. I'm not here for a fight, Jin-woo. I'm here for the woman you stole 6 years ago. I'm here for the truth. The truth is that she is my wife, Jin-woo hissed. Moving down the stairs with the predatory grace of a panther, he stepped into Julian's personal space, his height and muscle making the other man look fragile. The truth is that she is the mother of my son, and the truth is that if you don't turn around right now, I will bury you in the foundation of this house. Bella, Julian ignored the threat, looking past the monster to the woman he had loved. Is this what you wanted? To be a trophy for a criminal? To live behind bulletproof glass? I have a home for you, a real home, no shadows, no blood. The tension in the foyer was a living thing. Jin-woo's hand went to the hidden holster at his back, his jaw tight enough to crack bone. He looked at Anabella, his eyes pleading and threatening all at once. He was the king who had everything, yet in this moment he felt like a beggar. For Anabella looked at Julian. She saw the peace he offered, the quiet life she had once dreamed of. Then she looked at Jin-woo. She saw the scars she had cleaned, the man who had knelt for her, the father who had fought a military to save their son. She saw the magnetic, addictive, and terrifyingly beautiful fire that had consumed her life. She walked down the remaining stairs and stood between the two men. She looked Julian in the eye, her voice clear and unwavering. Julian, the girl you loved died in Marseille 6 years ago. The woman standing here, she doesn't want peace if it means living without the storm. She turned to Jin-woo, reaching out to take his hand. His fingers were cold, trembling slightly until she interlaced hers with his. The relief that flooded his expression was so raw, it was painful to watch. I'm not a trophy, Julian, she continued. I'm a partner, and this man, monstrous as he may be to the world, is my soul. You need to leave now, before the shadows decide for you. Julian looked at their joined hands, the mahogany skin and the pale knuckles, the black diamond ring catching the light. He saw the possessive way Jin-woo pulled her closer the moment she finished speaking. He realized then that there was no saving her. She wasn't a victim. She was a participant. I hope the fire is worth the burn, Bella, Julian said quietly, turning and walking out of the fortress. The silence that followed was heavy. Jin-woo didn't let go of her hand. He led her back up the stairs, past the guards and into the sanctuary of their room. The moment the doors closed, he slammed her against the wood, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that was desperate, hungry, and full of a terrifying, explosive passion. It wasn't a kiss of victory, it was a kiss of relief. He tasted of fire and whiskey, his hands roaming over her curves with a frantic, possessive energy that made her breath hitch. He pulled back for a second, his forehead resting against hers, his eyes dark and dilated. "Tell me again!" he commanded, his voice a low, vibrating rumble. "I'm yours, Jin-woo," she whispered, her hands tangling in his hair. "I've always been yours." "I will never be enough for you," he confessed, a rare moment of vulnerability slipping through his armor. "I am too dark, too jealous, too much. I will spend the rest of our lives trying to keep the world from taking you back." "Then let me be the one to keep you grounded," she said, pulling him down for another kiss. The months turned into a year. The Shadow King and his queen became the stuff of legend and soul. They moved through the city like a single entity. Wherever Jin-woo went, Anabella was there, a vision of beauty and strength that commanded as much respect as his guns. They had found a balance in the chaos, a slow-burn devotion that only grew more intense with every threat they faced. Leo grew taller, his sharp mind already beginning to grasp the weight of the name he carried. Jin-woo was a devoted father, his softest moments reserved for the boy who had his eyes. But his eyes always found Anabella. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in a safe, beautiful violet, the family sat in the garden. Leo was practicing his martial arts forms with Min-ho, their shadows long on the grass. Jin-woo and Anabella sat on a stone bench, his arm draped around her shoulders, pulling her into the warmth of his side. "You're thinking again," she noted, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I'm thinking that I'm the luckiest sinner in the world," Jin-woo admitted. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a new ring, not a black diamond of war, but a clear, radiant stone that caught the fading light. "The elders are gone. The Choi family is a memory. Julian is a ghost. I want to marry you again, properly. No masks, no bodyguards, just us. Anabella looked at the ring, then up at the man who had become her world. She saw the king who had learned to love, and the monster who would still kill for her in a heartbeat. She saw the perfect, addictive tragedy of their lives. On one condition, she said, a playful spark in her eyes. Bar anything. Name it. But you have to let me drive the car to the ceremony. Jin-woo laughed, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy that echoed through the garden. He pulled her into a deep, lingering kiss, his hands possessive as they held her face. Deal, but I'm still the one who gets to carry you across the threshold. Bar deal, she whispered. As the stars began to poke through the twilight, the Mafia King and his queen sat in the silence of their reclaimed kingdom. They knew the world outside was still dangerous. They knew that there would be more wars, more ghosts, and more threats to the throne. But as they looked at each other, the magnetic, explosive chemistry between them felt like a shield that no bullet could pierce. They were the Park family, they were the fire and the ashes, and they would never, ever be apart again. Jin-woo leaned in one last time, his lips brushing her ear. I love you, Anabella, more than the power, more than the city, more than my own life. I know, she said, her heart full. I love you too, Jin-woo, my king. The whirlwind that had started in Marseille and survived the fires of Seoul had finally found its center. The story of the man who vanished and the woman who stayed was no longer a tragedy. It was a masterpiece of protection, passion, and a love that refused to die. Bar is Jin-woo being a protector or a predator? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. And if you're addicted to this story, show your loyalty by hitting like and subscribing so you never miss a thing.